Welcome to the Marriage Steps podcast. We're developing a long-lasting, happy relationship as the status symbol to achieve. And following my 6 marriage steps is a path to help get you there. The 6 steps are establishing a covenant foundation, owning your brokenness, learning to share power, developing emotional attachment, cultivating sexual fireworks, and staying in love. The 6 steps are covered at my Total Marriage Refresh seminars coming up in both Denver and Dallas this coming spring. I'm your host, Dr. Wyatt Fisher, licensed psychologist and marriage counselor. For more marriage resources, go to my website, drwyattfisher.com, and follow me at facebook.com/Dr. Wyatt Fisher or on Instagram at Dr. Wyatt Fisher. Today I'm going to focus on 6 ways no sex impacts high libido partners. This can happen frequently, where you're in a marriage and your libido is different than your partner's, or perhaps you're going through different seasons or different challenging times in your relationship, and all of a sudden there's no sex for an extended period of time. And when that occurs, it impacts the low libido partner much differently than the high libido partner. On average, no sex doesn't impact the low libido partner because they're low libido. And because they're low libido, sex isn't on their mind very much. And they can go for extended periods of time without ever even thinking about sex. So to go through an extended period of time in their marriage without any sex often doesn't really bother them. They may notice a lack of closeness perhaps here and there, but on average, it doesn't really faze them. However, for a high libido partner, going through extended periods of no sex in marriage can be devastating. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. So a lot of you know my story regarding my wife, and she was raised with rather extensive sexual trauma. She was repeatedly exposed to sex and sexual activity against her will. And that created a deep disgust in her towards sex and towards sexual activity. And then her first boyfriend, when she was very young at 14, took advantage of her, took her virginity, used her, then cheated on her. And so her developmental years around sex and sexuality were extremely poor. And unfortunately, that trauma carried right into our marriage. And so we've gone through several seasons in our marriage where we've had extended periods of abstinence. And me being the high libido partner, it's been devastating. And it's really hurt our relationship on several levels. And it's been hard for her for different reasons and definitely hard for me. And we've had to receive help to work through the damage that's been done. So I'm going to go through the 6 ways no sex can impact the high libido partner. The first thing is rejection. When your partner doesn't want to have sex with you and you're the high libido person, it's profound rejection. It feels like you're not wanted, that you're not desirable, that they're pushing you away, that they are rejecting you. And rejection is one of the worst experiences a human can feel because it's basically saying to your face, I don't want you. So rejection is a top thing that can happen for a high libido partner going through a period of no sex. And that leads to number 2. Number 2 is inadequate. When you're the high libido person and your partner is not interested or is avoiding sex with you, the next step that you can feel is inadequate. There must be something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not handsome enough. Maybe I'm not beautiful enough. Maybe I'm not sexually attractive to them enough. And usually that's not the reason that they're not interested in sex. It's usually other factors. However, it can create a sense of inadequacy for a lot of people, and it creates this doubt. What's wrong with me? Why don't they want me? There must be something flawed within me, or else they would want me. So that can be a second ramification, is a sense of inadequacy. A third thing that can happen when you're the high libido person going through abstinence in your marriage is fear. When you get rejected sexually, the last thing you want to do is initiate sex because you have been crushed again and again and again. You've reached out for sex, and majority of the time your spouse has said no, and they've rejected your advances. And when that does to you is it creates a tremendous amount of fear of initiating any type of sexual contact because it preoccupies you that the last thing you want to do is get rejected again, so you stop initiating. because you get consumed with fear. The fourth thing that can happen when you're going through this long period of no sex in your relationship and you're the high libido person is you can start to detach. And detachment can happen on two levels. First, it can happen on an emotional level where you start walling yourself off, almost as a defense mechanism, because it's so painful to be vulnerable and to feel rejected and unwanted. So therefore, you start trying to cope with that situation by walling yourself off and detaching. So perhaps you don't look at your partner as much. Perhaps you don't share to the same level of depth that you used to. Perhaps you don't talk as much. Perhaps you're not around them as much anymore. You start detaching as a way to cope with the rejection that you're feeling so that it doesn't hurt as bad. Because if you're more removed and more detached, the rejection doesn't hurt as bad. Another way people detach is through physical. So they probably will stop touching their partner. The affection goes away. There's probably no more light touches on the shoulder, or there's probably very little hugs, or there's probably very few strokes of the arm. Affection will start to decrease and stop because the high libido person is detaching. They're becoming an island because they feel like they have to watch out for themselves and they can't put themselves in a vulnerable position anymore to get hurt. And so they start removing themselves emotionally and then physically. A fifth thing that can happen is distraction. So when you're feeling this sense of despair because your top need is not being met, which is the high libido person, their need for sex, it can start creating this feeling of despair. And so to cope with that despair, a lot of people will throw themselves into something for distraction. So some people will become a workaholic and all they do is work on their work projects. Other people will spend a lot of time on hobbies or a lot of time on with their friends or on video games or you name it. But distraction becomes a common coping mechanism to deal with the feelings of despair that can get stirred up when you're going without sex for an extended period of time. Sex, by the way, is tied to testosterone. So the higher level of testosterone, on average, the higher your desire for sex. Sometimes it can be more emotionally driven, like I want to have sex because then I feel emotionally close and secure in the relationship, or it affirms me that I'm beautiful or that I'm wanted. But oftentimes there's this testosterone biological drive for sex. And so if you're a low libido person listening to this, one analogy is food. Think about your desire for food. It's a biological drive. And if you go without food for a certain amount of time, it becomes painful. And then pretty soon, all you think about is food because you're starving. And that's how it can feel when you're the high libido person going through an extended period of time without sex in your marriage. It can feel like you're starving and it can feel like you're in desperation. So a lot of people go to distraction to try to distract themselves and to try to stuff down what they're really feeling. The sixth thing that can happen if you're the high libido person going for an extended time without sex is your desire, your yearning for sex from other people will increase because it starts to create almost an emergency feeling within you that I need to get sex somewhere. So susceptibility to outsourcing or looking elsewhere or being drawn to somebody else goes up on average as this extended period of time continues in the marriage. So it just increases the risk. It increases the susceptibility because, again, it's similar to someone going without food for an extended period of time, and before long, they're looking in the dumpster for food because it's turned into an emergency for them because it's this biological desire and yearning is not getting met. And so they start going to extremes to get it met. And that's what can happen a lot in marriage. Now, obviously, that never makes it right. If you decide to step outside of your marriage, that's 100% your fault, regardless of what's going on in your marriage. It's still your choice. However, if a marriage goes through extended periods of abstinence, it certainly raises the susceptibility for the high libido person to desire other people sexually. So those are the 6 ways no sex impacts high libido partners. Number 1 is rejection. Number 2 is inadequate. Number 3 is fear. Number 4 is detach. Number 5 is distraction. And number 6 is yearning for others. If you enjoyed the episode today, the best way to say thank you is to scroll down and click the 5 stars. The more positive reviews I receive, the higher the podcast will appear in search results so others can find it and receive tools for their marriage. If you believe in this podcast and want to help me reduce the divorce rate, please consider becoming a monthly supporter by going to patreon.com/marriage steps. That's patreon.com/marriage steps. Depending on your level of support, you'll receive a public thank you, a free marriage training module, or 2 free tickets to my next Total Marriage Refresh seminar. Also, if this podcast has made a positive impact on you in your relationship, I would love to hear from you. My email is info@drwyattfisher.com. That's drwyattfisher.com. And remember, your marriage is alive. If you care for it, it will thrive. And if you don't, it will die. The choice is up to you. Take care.